Welcome to this discussion on questions and answers that appeared in the previous year PGTRB chemistry examinations. Specifically in this lecture I am going to discuss spectroscopic problems that appeared in 2015 TRB examination. Okay, let's get into the topic. So this is question number 1. Copper 2 complex produce an ESR signal because of its dash electronic configuration. We know very well that paramagnetic species are species containing unpaired electron. Species containing unpaired electrons. Unpaired electrons, okay, are active in ESR spectroscopy, electron spin resonance spectroscopy. So there should be at least one unpaired electron. Okay. So in copper 2, we know very well for copper 2 the electronic configuration is 3d9 for copper 2. So for 3d9 we know very well the 3d subshell has 5 orbitals. So if you fill up these 9 electrons, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we left with one unpaired electron here. We have one unpaired electron. This unpaired electron is responsible for the copper 2 complexes become active in ESR spectroscopy. So the correct option for this question is option C. It is due to D9 configuration copper 2 complexes produce an ESR signal. Okay, let's see the next question. How many proton NMR signals appear would be obtained for the following compound? So here the compound given is a parachloroanisole. Parachloroanisole is given, OCH3. In the para position we have chlorine. Parachloroanisole. You know very well, chemically non-equivalent protons. Chemically non-equivalent protons will give signals in NMR. Signals will give signal in NMR. Okay, so number of chemically non-equivalent protons, right, will give you number of signals in the spectrum. So in this compound, in the given compound, we have 3 protons attached to present in methyl group, and we have 2 protons here. These 2 protons are equivalent. So if this is A, this is also A, and these 2 protons are also equivalent with respect to the methoxy group as well as chlorine. So if this is B, this is also B, right, and the methyl proton, let it be C. So we have 3 different protons present in this molecule. They are chemically non-equivalent. Therefore for this compound we will get 3 signals in NMR, right. Then next question, question number 3. According to Franck-Condon principle, dash transitions takes place so rapidly that a dash molecule does not change its internuclear distance appreciably during the transition. Okay, we know very well, suppose if I consider a diatomic molecule, and we will be having the ground electronic state and the excited electronic state, first excited, like this we have many excited electronic states, right. This is question number 3. Now this is the here this is internuclear distance, and here we have the potential energy or the energy, right, which depends on the internuclear distance. Then transition takes place according to Frank Quantum principle, transition takes place always vertically, right? And during the electronic transitions are very fast. This is ground electronic level, and this is first excited electronic level. Electronic transitions are very fast, so that the very fast compared to the vibrational motion. So when electronic transition takes place, okay, there won't be any appreciable change, right, that occur in the vibrational vibrational motion. That means the internuclear distance practically remains constant, right, during electronic transition. So the correct option for this question is, according to Frank Quantum principle, electronic transition takes place so rapidly that a vibrating molecule does not change its internuclear distance appreciably during the transition. So the correct option for this question is option B. Okay, electronic transition takes place so rapidly that a vibrating molecule does not change its internuclear distance appreciably during the transition, right? Then next question, the spin quantum number of N15 nucleus is, listen, actually by using Northam rule, we can also calculate, but for this you need to remember the nuclear shell model, right, and the how nucleons are arranged, right, in nuclear shells, right. These are all this requires some for this you have to remember certain quantities. Okay, what is the better one is try to remember the spin value of the nucleus. Okay, but we have method to calculate, right, but it is somewhat lengthy one, right, easy only, but it's somewhat lengthy. So what I will suggest is that if questions asked like this, right, it is well and good if you remember the nuclear spin quantum numbers. Okay, let me show you some of the nuclear spin quantum number here for common nucleus. See here, for proton the I value is 1/2 for proton, and for deuterium nucleus I value is 1. For B10 boron 10 nucleus I value is 3. For B11 it is 3/2. For C13 it is 1/2. For N14 it is 1. For N15 nucleus I equal to 1/2. For sodium 23 3/2. For aluminium 27 5/2. For chlorine 35 3/2. For chlorine 37 3/2. For manganese 55 5/2. For cobalt it is 7/2. For copper it is 3/2. For iodine 127 5/2. For gold 197 it is 3/2. For vanadium 51 the I value is 7/2. Right. See here I have shown some of the common nucleus for which the spin quantum number values, right, are very, very important. Okay, so try to remember these values. So by remembering this you can easily answer this type of questions, right, without doing any calculations, right. So for N15 nucleus the correct option is option C. For N15 nucleus I value is 1/2. Okay, so the correct option for this question is option C. Right. Then the next question, theoretically how many ESR lines are expected for anthracene radical? We know very well the anthracene molecule. For ESR signal, what is important is we need to identify chemically non-equivalent protons. Okay, because the C13 in ESR spectroscopy, the signal due to electron is splitted by active nucleus present in the compound, and here in this compound we have carbon as well as hydrogen atoms, but we have plenty of C12 carbon. Okay, so I value for C12 is 0. Therefore practically protons will split the signal, because for proton I value is 1 by 2. So we need to identify how many different types of protons are available in this molecule. Okay, so here if I take this proton, in this carbon we have proton. If I take this proton as A, then this is also A, this is also A, this is also A. So we have 4 equivalent protons. Then if you take this proton, if this is B, this is also B, this is also B, this is also B. So we have 4 types of another set of protons. Then here we have 1 proton, here we have 1 proton, let it be Cc. So we have 3 set of protons here. All the protons, okay, will split the signal due to the electron transition. Okay, now, or the ESR transition, right? So now how many lines that will get? Number of lines. So number of lines, number of spectral lines in ESR. How many lines will get? Yeah, this you can calculate using the formula 2ni plus 1, 2ni plus 1. But here I have 3 different set of protons. So let me take the first one as A proton, Na Ia plus 1, okay, into 2 into Nb Ib plus 1 into 2 into Nc Ic plus 1, where N is the number of protons, I is the nuclear spin quantum number. Okay, so for A proton we have 4 A protons, so 2 into 4, I value is 1 by 2 plus 1 for proton, second one. And we have 5, similarly we have 4 B protons, so 2 into 4 into 1 by 2 plus 1. Then we have C protons, we have 2 C protons here, so 2 into 2 into 1 by 2 plus 1. Okay, so if you simplify this, you'll get 2 cancels, 4 plus 1 5. Here also 2 cancel, 4 plus 1 5. Here 2 cancels, 2 plus 1 3. So 5 into 5 25, 25 into 3 75 lines are supposed to be appeared for ESR lines, okay, for the molecule anthracene in ESR spectrum. So the correct option for this question is option A. Okay, for this question the correct option is A. Right, then next question. In CO2 molecule, the degenerate fundamental vibrations are, okay, in CO2 molecule the degenerate fundamental vibrations are, yeah, in CO2 molecule, in carbon dioxide molecule, okay, it's a linear molecule, therefore you can use the formula 3n minus 5 to find the total number of normal modes of vibrations. So 3 into 3 minus 5, you'll get 4. You'll get 4. So there are 4 normal modes of vibrations. Among these four, there will be n minus 1 stretching vibrations. So n is 3 atoms are there, so 3 minus 1 equal to 2. So we have 2 stretching vibrations. I'll write shortly STVib, stretching vibrations. So among the 4, 2 vibrations are stretching, therefore the remaining 2 are bending vibrations. You know very well, in these 2 stretching vibrations, so we have, in stretching vibration we have 2. One is symmetric stretching vibration, symmetric stretch. Another one is asymmetric stretching vibration. Okay, then if you see, we have 2 stretching vibration, totally we have 4. 4 minus 2 will give you the bending vibrations. So in this molecule we have bending vibrations, okay, number 2, stretching vibration 2, bending vibration 2, right? In bending we have in plane bending and we have out of plane bending vibrations. Okay, so we have totally 4 vibrations. You know very well, asymmetric stretching vibration has the highest frequency in general. Okay, so asymmetric stretching frequency, asymmetric stretching frequency has highest value. Then symmetric stretching frequency will have the next value, symmetric stretching. Okay, in this, these 2 bending, one occur in plane, another one is occurring out of plane. Anyway, the energy for these 2 vibrations are actually equal. Therefore, we can say that these two vibrations are degenerate vibrations. So let me write the stretching frequency for bending vibration. Okay, these two are degenerate. Okay, they have same energy. So in CO2 molecule, the degenerate fundamental vibrations are, okay, in plane bending vibration and out of plane bending vibration. Out of plane bending vibration. So the correct option for this question is option B. Okay, and I like to give this information also here. See, in CO2, the two vibrations, that is symmetric stretch and asymmetric stretch, they occur along the bond axis or along the principal axis. Okay, during this vibration, right, if at all dipole moment exists, the dipole moment lies along the principal axis. Therefore, we can say that symmetric stretching and asymmetric stretching vibrations as parallel vibrations. These two are parallel vibrations. Okay, in plane and out of plane bending vibrations are called perpendicular vibrations. Okay, right. Then next question: the source of light used in ultraviolet photoelectron spectroscopy is, yeah, in photoelectron spectroscopy (PES), right? We have two major types. Number one, ultraviolet photoelectron spectroscopy. The other one is X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy. In short, we call it as XPS. This is UPS, ultraviolet photoelectron spectroscopy. XPS is also called as ESCA. ESCA means electron spectroscopy for chemical analysis. Okay, and what is the source that we use for ultraviolet? For ultraviolet photoelectron spectroscopy, helium lamp is used, right? HELIUM. Helium lamp is used as a source for ultraviolet photoelectron spectroscopy. For XPS, we use the aluminium K alpha radiations. Aluminium K alpha radiation or copper K alpha radiations are used as a source for X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy. Okay. Then next one: which of the following principle is used in laser action? We know very well, laser means light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. For laser, listen, we know very well. Suppose I'll consider a two-level system. This is the ground level and this is the excited level. Now when you pass electromagnetic radiation, what will happen? Molecule absorbs the radiation, therefore transition occur from ground state to the excited state. Okay, so transition will occur from ground state to excited state by the absorption of radiation. So this is called stimulated absorption, because molecule undergoes transition in the presence of radiation. Therefore, it is called stimulated absorption. Right. Then, after reaching the excited state, molecule will try to come down. Okay, by losing the energy in the form of radiation. Right. Here we have two routes. One is they may come down by emitting the radiation in a spontaneous manner. So it is called spontaneous emission, and the rate constant for the spontaneous emission is usually represented as A. So A is the spontaneous emission. Spontaneous emission is not responsible for laser action. For laser action, what is important is stimulated emission. Yes, the light that we pass can also makes transition, right, from a higher level to lower level. This is also possible. Let me draw like this. Okay, you'll get actually if one photon hits one molecule in the excited state, right, you'll get two photons. Okay, this is what we call as amplification, right? So this we are amplifying the signal, right? So one photon actually gives you two photons, right, as a result, right? Therefore, this is called stimulated emission, because in this emission you require a photon. right? So stimulated emission will give you more photons, right, as a result. Therefore, for light amplification, right, we require stimulated emission. Okay, and for the stimulated emission, we represent the rate constant as B. Okay, this is rate constant for spontaneous emission, and this is rate constant for stimulated emission. Stimulated emission. Okay, and you know very well, using Einstein semi-classical theory, we can write that A by B equal to 8 pi nu cube by C cube. Right, there is a relation available between the two rate constants. Okay, it indicates clearly that as frequency increases, if the frequency of the incident radiation, increases, then spontaneous emission, okay, will occur in a more probable manner. So spontaneous emission is highly probable when frequency is very high. Okay, laser or B, stimulated emission is highly probable if frequency is very low. That's why laser action, that is the amplification, is possible for microwave. Okay, low frequency, right? And for visible light, for IR, right? These are all, for these radiations, they have low frequency. For low frequency radiation, stimulated emission will occur in a more probable manner. And you know very well, amplification of microwave radiation is called maser. Microwave amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. And amplification of visible radiation is called laser. Amplification of IR radiation is called IR acer. These two are more common, so keep this in mind. It is not possible to get or it's not possible to amplify UV or X-ray signals, right, by this technique, because their frequencies are very high. Since they have high frequency, right, it is not possible to amplify the signals of UV and X-ray by stimulated emission method, okay, as per Einstein semi-classical theory. Okay, yeah. So which of the following principle is used in laser action? The correct option for this question is option B. It is stimulated emission. Okay, yeah. I stop here. We'll meet with another set of questions, right, by next class. Thank you.